Greetings, various people across the grand and mighty spectrums of time and indeed the multiverse. I am Alexander Gordon and today I am going to be talking about Vore and explaining what the fuck it is and kind of why I like to partake in this. So, before I begin, this is going to be a word of warning. A word of warning. This is going to be very not safe for work. This is going to be discussing things that are likely to be disturbing and that are likely to be of a disturbingly sexual nature. And suffice to say, if you are under the if you are not an adult in your respective country and state, don't watch this. Don't watch this before bed. Don't watch this before an important meeting, before work or anything like that. Do not watch this if you do not have the time needed to chill the fuck out afterwards and process what the fuck you have just seen. I will say that there is going to be no actual graphic imagery on screen. There is just going to be me talking and explaining this stuff. So I suppose if you're listening on headphones, it won't necessarily be such an issue. But like you're gonna want to make sure you're in a place where if you need to take 5 and chill the fuck out and, I don't know, get some Baileys or just get a tub of ice cream and just gorge yourself, then, you know. Or maybe gorging isn't the right term to, like but if whatever you need to do, you need to be able to do it. And equally, you know, who knows? It might be that you are one of those people who suddenly finds themselves strangely aroused by the subjects that I am going to discuss, and so you may want to be on your own with time on your hands for an entirely different reason. But anyway, the main reason for this whole list of content warning isn't so much that I give a shit about warning people about discussing a very disturbing and sexual topic that even mentioning the name of could be controversial or bring up grounds of being misogynistic. It's mainly that I have a feeling I'm going to be talking for an awful long time, and I don't want this video to take so bloody long to render. So I'm gonna stop this part right here so that the intro can be swiftly blended together with the beginning of this part, because jump cuts can happen in the video, but the beginning intro sequence has to be blended together. So consider this your 10-second countdown to stop watching if you are not ready for the roller coaster you are about to go on. Okay? 10, 9, 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Cut! So, Vore is, in the simplest terminology, the sexualization of predation, either as predator or as prey. Admittedly, this is something that it deserves the nuance. It deserves proper explanation, because just saying predation doesn't really bring up the kind of correct attributes. So I suppose a classic example of Vore that is sort of societally acceptable is the sexualization of vampires. Okay, I mean, for God's sake, the Twilight Saga is all the Twilight Saga, and then also like the Vampire Chronicles and Interview with a Vampire, and basically all the Anne Rice stuff. All of the aren't these immortal, dark, brooding predators really hot sort of shtick. Now, admittedly, I think a great deal of that is the whole idea that, you know, that essentially these are immortally fit young men, right? Like, that's the vampire has. You can't ignore that immortal fit young men is going to play a part in that, or indeed immortally ever young and beautiful young women. That's gonna play a certain amount in and why vampires have a certain amount of sexual allure. But the predation aspect is certainly part of that, or at least that's where I suppose most people get their first, I suppose, more societally conventional forays into the Vore scene, because kind of vampires have that great aspect that Vore has of they can do it. They can predate on people in a non-fatal manner. In that you can have all the elements of a sort of asexual romance with, you know, the flirting and the coming to understand each other, and the sort of, or at least the way the media portrays it, the way the fantasies kind of tend to portray it, of the, you know, the sort of cat and mouse game of chasing until finally they reveal their intentions and desires to each other. Except you basically replace the consumption with the sexual act. That instead of bumping uglies, they do something else. So yeah, vampires are generally the more acceptable form of Vore, where you replace blood sucking with bumping uglies and penetration in that regard. And well, vampires are, of course, more you know, they are an accepted sort of form of Vore in popular society, because you know, we donate blood anyway, so the idea of vampires accepting donations of blood isn't such a isn't so outlandish, in the sense that it's survivable by a normal human. Whereas, and that's why you find kind of Vore is generally more acceptable, because like Vore is inherently Vore is inherently taboo, right? It is inherently about the darkness of it, about how society frowns upon it, right? But at the same time, if you're going to like Vore as a form, as an art form, as a story to be explored, you don't necessarily want something so starkly predatory, right? You want something that is that is portraying the predator story, but with, I suppose, the excuse of, well, they can survive it, so it's just basically like extreme BDSM. Indeed, this is the kind of role I take with the approach I take within my own fiction, of essentially, like, I have these creatures known as sylphs, who are essentially the sylphs were created by a race that wanted to survive through essentially being exploited and thus being sure that their species would survive. So they created a biological machine whose substances, when taken, would allow them to essentially take on the necessary attributes to pass along through being exploited, right? The idea being that cute things in society are kept alive. Things that we need for their meat are kept alive. We keep cows as a species alive because we need their milk and we need their flesh to eat, and we need their skins to make clothes out of. Same thing with sheep and stuff. We keep cats and dogs and hamsters alive because we think they're cute and cuddly and we want to keep them as pets. And so this dying race created this pill that would allow them to not only pass, but to be so desirable pets and kind of cattle that their species would be kept alive. And then in the backstory, in the lore, basically their ship docks and the traders go, who gives a shit about this race? But their biological machine, I wonder what happens if we try this out. And then it kind of turns out that humans are the most well-liked of all the different species that have this variant upon them. And so sylphs are generally kind of variants of humans. Okay. And so sylphs are essentially people repackaged as pets or whatever, and there is this other aspect then of the weresharks. Weresharks being essentially the idea that the last great werewolf, in a bit of desperation to keep the sort of genetics of the weresharks going, bit into the heart of a great white shark, and essentially the genetic code refused to let go, right? And so the weresharks were created as this ultimate just force of domination and destruction that cannot be stopped, right? Like, they have 3 hearts, the heart of a shark, the heart of a wolf, the heart of a person, and they only need one of them to survive and keep going. And indeed, actually, they only need one of their valves to still be pumping under the right conditions, because then, so long as one part of one heart is still beating, it might, under the right circumstances, heal enough of the rest of the heart so that it can then have a whole heart, and then once it's got the whole heart, it can heal up the rest of itself. And at the same time, of course, right, you can, with modern technology, right, in theory, because of course fictional beings don't exist, you could remove all 3 of the hearts from a wereshark by putting them onto an artificial blood pump, and in time the wereshark would regenerate their hearts. And so essentially a were-sylph is what is known when you essentially give a wereshark the sylph pill, and the sort of innate submissiveness of the sylph counteracts the sort of innate domineering aspect of the wereshark, and so you end up with something that is submissive and masochistic and can entirely regenerate the entirety of its body. And that's kind of the excuse I go with. It's like, It's fine. It's just sort of BDSM to the extreme, because yeah, they can get eaten alive because they can regenerate their entire body. It's fine. I mean, to a certain extent, right, the Hannibal Lecter fandom is basically kind of doing Vore anyway. Because, you know, and Hannibal Lecter is really, he is the poster child for, like, why Vore is not necessary, not necessarily, like, Hannibal Lecter is why Vore is fucking creepy, right? Because it's all very well having, you know, like, the fact that there are people who are into, you know, rape fantasies, even, like, people who have fantasies about being raped and what have you, because those can be, you know, under BDSM you can sort of simulate that kind of thing safely. There is no safe way to simulate cannibalism, which is what Hannibal is, right? Vore, when it comes to fantasy creatures who look human but aren't, that's in a different vein, because that's like, well, I would only do so under these circumstances, right? That's like, well, if vampires exist, well, if weresharks existed. Whereas Hannibal is just the Hannibal sort of fandom, or the Hannibal sort of Vore fandom, that is really just basically saying, yeah, if there were a twisted serial killer who liked to eat people, that would be cool. And like, no, it wouldn't. No, it wouldn't. That would not, under any way, shape, or form, be cool. Right? But again, if it's fiction, it's not doing anyone any harm. And again, like, so long as it's... I mean, we're not even at this point talking about... When it comes to Vore, we aren't talking about, you know, the dangerous effects of exposure and representation in media, because, you know, Vore is underground stuff, right? Like, yeah, Hannibal is a big thing in popular culture, but Hannibal is very explicitly the villain, right? Even in the sort of the Brian Fuller Hannibal Lecter TV series, where he's played by Mads Mikkelsen, and it's kind of dreamy, right? Even then, it's very explicit. He's a bad guy. He's not someone you want to like. No, he's fucked up. You do not want to know Hannibal Lecter. And even though in that Hannibal Lecter TV series, they have romance as part of that. Which is a hell of a line to walk, but the Hannibal Lecter TV series manages to walk it. And this is where kind of... This is why Vore is difficult. Because Vore is the kind of fantasy that you really can't do safe, sane and consensually in real life. And so saying, well, it's fiction, so it's okay, isn't gonna gel well with some people. And I understand that, and I respect that. And indeed, it can be incredibly off-putting, and indeed it does. If you are going to partake in Vore, you do kind of need to keep a sensible head on your shoulders with regards to being self-aware as to what the fuck you're doing, right? You need to make sure you never get too comfortable, right? Because part of the appeal of Vore, apart from anything else, you know, is that it is transgressive. It is kind of the ultimate of transgressions. And I must say, because I know that it may be, you see a guy on the internet with a fucking neck beard talking about Vore, talking about his fiction that he has written and how he has created this fictional species that wants to be kept as pets, right? Like, you're gonna be thinking you're gonna have a certain picture in your head about the sort of the role that you think I will be playing in these scenarios, right? Funnily enough, my sort of what kind of got me into Vore was more sort of the animal kingdom and like the fact that, you know, praying mantises, the fact that the men like literally are terrified of the women, right? Because the women will literally eat their heads off whilst they are having sex. The fact that, you know, female anglerfish will predate upon the men until the men are just a tiny set of testicles gyrating away inside the female. The fact that there is a species of spider that will literally like climb into the mouth of the woman it is trying to seduce and like grind itself against the gums of the female as it is having sex with her, and then jump back out, insert other of its penises into the female, and then climb back in to kind of get finished off, right? Like, these are things that happen in the animal kingdom, right? The animal kingdom does Vore, right? And let's be honest, right? If you are a guy and you are in any way someone who has felt pangs of worry or concern or nervousness around women, then the animal kingdom is terrifying. Because time and time again in the animal kingdom, it crops up that Vore is just what happens when women have reproductive control. Right? Like the fact that they have observed that there is a kind of a kind of animal that has, whereby the female essentially has a protuberance to latch hold of the males in order to extract the seed from them. In the animal kingdom, the women control reproduction, so yeah, that means that some species, in order to get their end away, they will be eaten. And in the case of like the praying mantises and the anglerfish, they don't want to be eaten, right? They'll try and avoid it. They will look damn hard and they'll be like, no, not sure. Oh, can I get to you when you're in a good mood when you've eaten? I don't want to die. But this species of spider, it doesn't give a shit. It wants to be eaten. It will actively be chewed up to increase its chances of having future generations with its genetics in it. So that's kind of where I was sort of introduced to Vore as a concept, as like, so this is a thing, was basically the animal kingdom, Right? Because in the animal kingdom, if you're a guy, then you gotta do anything to increase your chances. And this is the sort of thing that kind of this is why I kind of half jokingly gave the warning at the beginning about whether you might need some time to masturbate afterwards. Because this is the sort of thing that when I first heard about it, I was utterly horrified. And then it kind of creeps up on you. And you start to wonder. And to begin with, I was doing it to kind of send a message. Because, you know, I'm a lapsed vegetarian. I tried to be a vegetarian. I recognised that being a vegetarian was morally superior, and basically my sister got a pet chicken, and I was like, I can't eat something that is a pet. I can't do it. I can't play with this thing when I eat its relatives. I just can't do it. So I tried to be a vegetarian. And then I realised I liked meat too much. Right? I was having fantasies about eating pigeons. Because I was just like, I need meat. Which isn't necessarily helped when, you know, you go out literally fucking anywhere and it's considered an extensive vegetarian section if there is one pasta dish, one mushroom dish, and one thing that is basically the same meat dish, but they've got corn sausages instead. Right? Like, that's what's generally considered an extensive vegetarian section. Right? So I couldn't do it. I like my food. I couldn't give up on food and become a vegetarian. And so I was feeling really angsty about it, because, you know, I am someone who gives a shit about my morality, and so this was a really difficult thing for me, and I basically realised, hold on, all I'm really doing by being a vegetarian is sending a message. Well, I'm a writer. I can send a message other ways. And so I started, well, I didn't start, but that's when I really properly started writing Vore intentionally to be like, yes, let's make you care about this character. Let's have a character that you love, that you want to see looked after, and then let's have them being eaten. And I was basically writing Vore to grotesque and horrify and disgust and just be like, yeah, you like this woman, don't you? Yeah, she's pretty, she's cute, she's really nice, isn't she? Yeah, and now here's the flesh being wrought from her bones, and here's her giggling and cheering about it, and ooh, she loves it, and doesn't it just terrify you and disgust you? You know, like, yeah, see, this is what happens when you eat chicken. And then I started to like the characters, and I started to like how the characters were relating to each other. And there really is this kind of, I mean, the big thing for me was the Contra-Voxi survivor, and I will explain that in a moment after I've blown my nose. So if you'll excuse me. So the Contra-Voxi were created to be the first aliens in my multiversal series, the first actual aliens, and not just people from different parallel Earths or parallel realities or extra-dimensional beings or whatever. Like, the first proper aliens, and they were gonna be this great monstrous invading force. I wanted something scary, right? So you have 8 gigantic hairy spider legs. You know, like size of a car, sort of thing. And then atop that base, you have like a tower of a great column of just tentacles, right? And this column goes up for like maybe 2-3 meters. And then atop that column of tentacles is a row of eyes on stalks that is 5 rows deep, right? And so they can see in every direction, right? And because they're eyes on stalks, right, they can have them pointed up in different directions, right? They you know, they don't just look in the little directions that they can, right? They can raise and lower their eyeballs. They can point them in different areas, right? So long as there's a space, and so they can get a really good view of things. And then atop, you know, right above their eyes is just like a flat top with just massive razor sharp teeth that retract to reveal their stomach. It's basically just a great column of stomach acid within which something can dissolve. And from out of this stomach flies a small, like bat-like thing that is attached through veins to the inside of this stomach. And this enables the contravoxi to fly. And it will fly up through this little bat-like thing, flying up out of its mouth, flapping up into the air. It will lift up into the air this great tentacled monstrosity with huge tarantula legs. And as it hovers over you and its asshole opens up, it reveals a second set of razor sharp teeth, and it can then descend down upon you, eating you alive through its asshole and depositing you straight into its massive stomach. Its brains are all around it. It can hear from every direction. If it feels the need to, it can vent its stomach acid out through any one of the little sucker holes and use the same technique to essentially vent flammable liquid like alcohol out through its suckers, and can then use the suckers to create spark so that it can effectively create flamethrowers on its tentacles. And oh, by the way, they've got amazing regenerative abilities as well. Like, they are meant to be terrifying monstrosities. And I was going to use them in a Bamkirch story. Then that didn't really work. And then I was writing a mad sort of story that was kind of a take on the culture. But then that kind of went down a rabbit hole through metatextuality of kind of accidentally becoming an Arrow fanfic. And then it kind of reached a point of me going, okay, this is way too creepy, I'm abandoning ship. But as part of that was introduced the idea that the Contravoxi would be this invading alien force within that story, and that essentially this character who would become the Slick. The Slick was kind of a character from actually back before I even wrote anything down, but like the Slick essentially is someone who has the capacity to control every subatomic particle in their body, right? So they can effectively alter their states of matter so that they can become solid, liquid, gas, plasma, right? And they can like phase through glass and walls and stuff like that by literally like merging with the wall. and sort of sliding between the gaps. Bullshit science, right? But that was the idea, and that this creature called the Slick will have made peace with the Contravoxite as part of these events. And then I kind of just... there was this scene that utterly grabbed hold of me and would not let go, that I had to write a thing about. Which was that, you know, at the end, the Slick gets married to this were shark, I think it was, in the end, and his wedding gift is essentially a pet sylph, right? And a pet sylph who is a were shark sylph. She can heal, and the Contravoxite are there in attendance, and so the sylph kind of excitedly bounds over to the table of the Contravoxite, because she's just that kind of woman who... wish fulfillment character of just like, she's so eager to please that she sees a way that she can please these Contravoxite who eat people alive, right? And at this point, the Contravoxite are very much, they are monstrous villains who eat people because they are monstrous villains, right? And it's just that this sylph character is so eager to please, and she doesn't care. And then that idea kind of grabbed hold in my mind and would not let go. Because at that point, the idea was very much that what was interesting here, what was arousing here, was the idea that the woman would be so utterly submissive as to be willing to be devoured, and that she would enjoy that. It was kind of... it was an extension of the thrill of the submissive, right? And then I started writing the Contravoxite Survivor, and the Contravoxite Survivor is very dark, right? Because the Contravoxite Survivor is setting up and exploring the Contravoxite as this invasive force, and the fact that essentially, right, the Contravoxite can travel space. They have the ability to have everyone eating vat-grown meat, lab-grown meat, like cultured meat. Like, they could do that, right? Like, they could very easily just take a sample of, like literally, say, you know, swab the inside of someone's mouth, and then from there get the necessary DNA or cells to create entire, you know, entire long chains of artificial muscle, artificially grown muscle, that they can then, you know, turn into sirloin steak or burgers or whatever, right? Like, you could, you know, we could theoretically have the technology very soon to do that ourselves, of being able to take a small sample of cells and grow that and replicate that until we had enough to make burgers or whatever out of. Indeed, we have already made the first burger in the lab, right? Admittedly, at this stage, it isn't vegetarian or vegan friendly, since the way that you make the cells work is through essentially killing 2 different cows, right? In that, so kind of the way that you get the cells in the first place is a lethal process, and then the way you keep the cells alive and you grow them involves the killing of another cow. So not really good at the moment, but you know, the idea is that if these contravoxi can travel space, right, if they can travel the multiverse, right, they certainly have the ability to harmlessly harvest skin cells or muscle cells and turn them into meat, right? They easily have that ability to harmlessly, guilt-free make meat for their entire ship of people to eat. And so the reason they don't is that they are basically just a barbaric set of sadistic shits, who are essentially ruled by a sort of monarchical imperial system, like in Rome. And it's very much like a critique on sort of feudalism, capitalism, and what have you. In that the idea is that the king and his delighted guests all get to dine on all these people that they have harvested from all these billion different universes that they that they savage, right? That all these contravoxi are going down onto the planet and are risking their lives, bringing back people as slaves for all these rich contravoxi to eat, all these aristocratic contravoxi to eat in these great lavish parties, as you know, the king is there with his you know, like small clique of wereshark sylphs who are ready, willing, and able to be eaten over and over and over again, whilst, you know, the engineers and the tech support crew and the people who you know, clean the ship and what have you are busy starving to death, right? And so you have this society of artificially enforced scarcity, of artificial inequality on two different levels, right? In that they are, you know, or I suppose three different levels, because you have the artificial inequality within the contravoxi society, in the sense that the aristocrats are busy, you know, wolfing down, you know, people left, right, and centre, and you know, the working class contravoxi are lucky if they get, you know, a little slab of vat-grown meat. And then you have the Vore society, and the Vore society are essentially how the contravoxi society has run, in the sense that the Vore are a race of technologically uplifted people who maybe like from sort of Roman or medieval times. And I realise that's a big distance, right? In terms of time period, but essentially they're fairly primitive people in terms of, you know, the cultural point of development and technological development that they originally came from. And the contravoxi basically say to them, like, we will give you a post-scarcity civilization, we will give you high-end, high-tech medicine, right? And this is like futuristic medicine even for us, right? Like, this is sort of like, hey, you wake up one day and you want to turn into a horse, we can do that for you, sort of level of technology. And I made a bit of a fool of myself because I wanted to express that these were a humanoid civilization from a different universe that evolved on a different planet, and they are in a very different culture, and so for them nature would have been a bad thing, because they would have come from a time when nature meant you got killed, right? Like, they have witnessed the ways that technology has magically changed their lives, right? So they refer to sort of the trans people as nature divergent within their society, because to divert from nature is good in their society. It is, you are being true to yourself despite the limitations of nature. And of course, this is a different culture, society. Doesn't matter. As far as trans people are concerned, it's insensitive, and it's insensitive. But it's. I feel like I have to point that out, because if I don't, I'll be accused of hushing it up. But it's not a big thing in the story. But they are that kind of technologically advanced society and tolerant society, and they just have this rule that between the ages of 25 and 35, if a contravoxi comes up to you, you say yes, even if that contravoxi is asking you to be eaten alive. And of course, the Vliguri can't heal. People can't heal, and like the idea is that there aren't enough Vliguri to go around for the contravoxi. So the way that the Emperor keeps his people happy is he goes on these great multiversal raiding trips across different Earths, because hey, the Earth has got all these people on it, so we'll just travel from different Earth to different Earth to different Earth to different Earth, savaging all the people on these Earths. Except the people on the Earth are a lot more technologically advanced than the Vliguri, and they have things like guns and missiles and nukes. And so the contravoxi encounter more resistance. They encounter, they get a lot of losses. It's not very good, right? It's not very good for, you know, it's not a good harvest, not good return on investment. And of course, it's utterly horrific for the humans who are getting harvested by these horrible tentacled monstrosities. And all of this is intended to be horrible and sort of story and plot, and it's meant to be dark, right? And even the elements of sort of the people being eaten alive, that's more a look how horrific eating meat is, look how horrific these aristocracy are, right? Where it starts to become Vore is that the way the main character, the titular contravoxi survivor, survives is that one of the wereshark sylphs gives her, basically infects her with the blood of the wereshark, and so he becomes a wereshark. He can survive being eaten alive, and so he is kept alive, and he survives the attack, and he is then smuggled out of the Emperor's chambers to this pub where he can get to safety. And the way he sort of stays sane, because he is a wereshark, is by drinking the blood of the other wereshark sylphs, because the blood of a sylph will calm a wereshark, right? Like, the submissiveness of the sylph is what keeps a wereshark sylph from going mad, right? Well, when you drink the blood of a sylph, not only do you gain a little bit of their regenerative abilities so as to stave off aging for a week, but you also gain a little bit of their submissiveness, which is enough to counteract and take the edge off the insanity of the wereshark if you are one but not a wereshark sylph. And their whole issue is they don't have a sylph book. They don't have a way to turn this guy into a wereshark sylph. And so it's all about getting this guy to somewhere where he can become a were-shark sylph so that he can have some kind of normality and safety again, right? Like, because as far as he's concerned, his entire world has been destroyed by the Contravoxai aliens, and this is all plot, right? But then, over the course of the journey, which you can read about in the Contravoxai Survivor, he starts to care for the characters, and I start to care for the characters. And, like, you know, these are a bunch of runaways, runaways on this ship of predators, the Contravoxai, right? And they have nothing. They have no money, right? And no recognition, no nothing, right? All they have is the fact that some of them are essentially cuttings, i.e., you know, that essentially the originals of them removed their hearts and basically gave them to this Contravoxai survivor as sort of help in his travels. You know, and those hearts then grew up into, you know, copies of the originals. These cuttings have nothing except for the small amount of fame and connections they have made, the originals have made, and the fact that they can be eaten alive and recover. And it becomes this whole plot about essentially performing a revolution, and this guy's desire to exact revenge for his people, but tempered with the fact that obviously the woman who saved his life really genuinely does love the Contravoxai who eats her, because she's just that kind of woman. Which was the kind of my infatuation with that level of submissiveness was what kick-started the whole thing. So it obviously plays an important part in the plot. And the sort of the way that it all shakes out peacefully is that the thing that turns the tables is that the Vliguri break out the humans and turn them into were-shark sylphs. And the were-shark sylphs then basically offer themselves to the lower class, working class Contravoxai, kind of for protection, but at the same time they are offering these poor, starving Contravoxai a source of food. And it's something that's motivated by plot and exploring character relationships and stuff. And then I found myself kind of falling in love with the characters and the character dynamics at hand, as these genuinely grotesque monsters, the Contravoxai, show affection for these Vliguri and for these were-shark sylphs, and that for a were-shark sylph and a Contravoxai to have a relationship of predator and prey that is consensual, and more than that, like, is a recurring thing, right? That shows an amazing level of trust and acceptance with one another, and I basically started to fall a little bit in love with the characters, right? And their characters are what make Vore. The fact that you, or at least as far as I'm concerned, like, the fact that you can believe that they want this and they trust the other to treat them, you know, quote unquote right, you know, because if you are a were-shark-sylph and you're going to be eaten, right, you have to trust that the person you are going to be eaten by is going to know when to stop, right? And also at the same time, there are, you know, you want to make sure that your hearts are kind of kept together, and ideally you want your heart and brain to be kept together and alive, because whilst memories can be recovered by hearts, you know, there is a sense in which the destruction of the brain is destruction of that particular self, right? So you want to have trust that everything's going to be okay, and they're not accidentally going to, you know, destroy the brain, or they're not accidentally going to split up the hearts or whatever. You know, you are putting yourself in an extremely vulnerable situation, and so for a character to do that is incredibly sweet. And equally, right, from the opposite perspective, I mean, 2016 was a hell of a year. A hell of a year. And 2017 isn't looking to be much better. So, the idea of essentially being able to have that level of trust that you can entirely give yourself over to someone, that they will entirely look after and protect you, is a compelling idea. And you know, I am a deeply cynical person at this point, right? You know, I like my fluffy romance stories, right? Particularly my young lesbian fluffy romance stories. But I kind of just believe at this point that everybody's a fucking douchebag, right? Nobody is that great. Everybody is fucked up in some way, shape, and form. And so, like, if being a were-shark-sylph was possible, and bearing in mind, you know, for me, I love sharks, so being able to turn into basically a great white shark, that would be pretty fucking rad in and of itself, right? That's a hell of a cherry on top sort of situation. But being able to turn into, if were-shark-sylphs existed, and it were possible to become one, then it'd be kind of reassuring to know from the beginning, oh, this is how the guy's a douchebag, right? To know from the beginning, yeah, this guy, this guy, or indeed this woman, or this person of whatever gender, although I suppose under the circumstances, maybe this is something that the trans community would want the cisgendered people to be the only people referred to, the only people applicable to. But you know, whatever. The individual involved, it would be kind of kind of reassuring to know the precise way in which they were a fucked up shithead to begin with, right? It's like, yeah, this person happens to like eating people, but they only eat were-shark cells. Okay, I can go forward from here, right? You know what you're dealing with. Although I should stress, fiction only. Fiction only, never in real life. In real life, it is not good to do this. Although I suppose if Contravoxi existed in real life, then we really would be fucked. Yeah. Although also it would be cool to be friends with a Contravoxi. Just, like, I created it to be monstrous, but it would just be so cool to just have, because Contravoxi would be so useful, you know, because they've got so many arms and they're so strong, you know. I mean, we're talking about a species that can, you know, literally, like, rip the arms and legs off a person so that they can eat them alive. So, you know, they can certainly help you put up some shelves, you know. Or if there's a particularly tough jam jar. Or indeed a particularly stubborn screw that won't come out because you don't have the right screw for it. Those suckers, man, they're useful. But no. Yeah, so that's kind of that's why I like Vore. And that's what Vore is. Vore is the predator and the prey. Oh, and before I go, I should just mention, like, the microphilia angle, right? I'm not exposed to macrophilia angle. So, macrophilia is giants, basically. Like, if someone says they are a microphilia, what they mean is that they basically want to bang Hagrid. Or, actually, Hagrid probably isn't huge enough for someone into macrophilia. Like, we're talking about people big enough to level cities, sort of huge. And then microphilia is the contrast, right? It's the idea of a person shrinking. For some people, they go down to, like, you know, centimeters in height. Like 5 centimeters in height or whatever, or even smaller than that. But for me, I'm kind of like, you know, say 5 inches to, you know, 12 inches in height. That's the sort of level that that I would find ideal for an individual to be shrunk to for my microphilia fetishes. And again, this is a thing that does not exist. It is actually impossible. So don't freak out, right? Microphilia, not possible. Macrophilia, may be possible, but nobody's going to be building a giant anytime soon. Wonder what macrophiliacs think about mechs. Anyway, but yeah, where this overlaps with Vore is that, obviously, if you are talking about your date either shrinking to a small size or enlarging to an incredibly huge size, then you are effectively, one way or another, intentionally or not, talking about a scenario in which the subject in question is now much more able to be swallowed whole or to swallow you whole. And that is kind of where it overlaps with Vore as a result. Also, I should mention that there are kind of, there's sort of three different versions of sort of Vore, in that there is the Vore that happens and it's not graphic, right? It's a sanitized version of the digestive system, right? It's kind of, I suppose, what I suppose Disney's fairy stories are to, like, Game of Thrones, right? Like, some Vore stories are just kind of like the predators eat people fully clothed, and they literally climb through the digestive tract, and they come out the other side and they're a bit smelly but otherwise okay, and it's more just an annoyance sort of thing, and about the sort of the conceptual situation than about the realism. Then there are the people who are, and I would be one of these people who are like, if you're gonna write this sort of story, you want to write it right, whereby if it's gonna happen, you want it to be, loosely speaking, relatively realistic, you know, to where it's like, no, if it's actually going to happen, then it would have to pay at least some kind of attention to the laws of physics, and like the fact of, no, nobody is going to eat anything with its fucking clothes on. Like, we are people. We do not eat people with their clothes on. No. You know, and unless you are literally something so fucking gigantic, or they are so small, you're not going to be swallowing them whole either. Sort of taking the more realistic approach and grimmer, gritty approach to the sort of Vore stuff, although I do tend to sort of go down, as previously explained, the route of, but they're all entirely happy and willing about it, and they can recover afterwards, so it's all okay anyway. Admittedly, I do tend to avoid going down the and then they come out the other side route, because I think that's just fucking grim, right? Like, there are sort of comics that you can read, Vore comics that you can read about, like, where you have a conversation, where you see a conversation between the predator to the prey that is crawling through their insides, and it's like, no, not for me. Like, even though if I'm going to write Vore, I'm going to write one where the prey is willing and the prey can recover, I want to make sure that even under an entirely fictitious scenario, that what is actually eaten isn't sentient. That what is actually eaten is just dead flesh and muscle, and not actually alive and talking to you as it goes through your digestive system. Like the fact that there are parts of the world where people, you know, will literally eat like live animals, swallow them alive, and that you can apparently feel them writhing down your throat and writhing in your stomach. No, thank you, no. Right? So the last thing I want is to have, you know, Vore picking up, you know, images of that. Because that's a level of disgustingness that I'm not willing to go to. And then there is the third kind of Vore, which is kind of the non-consensual thing that is just creepy as fuck. Like, where I mean, you kind of see this with regards to microphilia as well, whereby there are some people who are just like, who essentially want who get off on microphilia and get off on Vore because it means they get to do horrible stuff to women, and that's where I draw the line, right? Like, you know, for me, this is the fancy of submissiveness, which might be a deluded misogynistic fancy, but in my honest opinion, I think it's a hell of a lot better than, you know, having a fancy about how good it would be to eat a woman against her will, which some people have, but, you know, so long as it is just fiction, then, you know, theoretically at least, no harm, no foul. But, yeah, that's not for me. Anyway, explanations of Vore and stuff done. I think I'm going to link off to the Controvoxi Survivor and to the Toymaker as well in this story. I think I will avoid linking off to the Vore story I wrote about myself, because yeah, you kind of, this is going to be difficult enough without giving you those very specific kind of nightmares. In fact, I think I basically removed it from my blog because I'm like, no, nobody needs to read this, not anymore. But yeah, yeah, I think I'll link off to the Shrinking as well, which the Shrinking again includes a kind of take on Vore as well at the end, basically because the Shrinking was one of those kinds of stories that I wrote inspired by something. That one was very much inspired by microphilia and sort of rediscovering a comic that kicked off my microphilia sort of feelings, and then basically the entire last half of it was written off the back of trying to justify one piece of artwork that wasn't connected to the original comics that inspired it, but that I felt I had to try to justify and find a way to fit into canon without it utterly horrifying me, because in that comic, if the thing wasn't to have, if the scene was to have been canon, then that would have suggested some very bad things happened to characters that I cared about. And yes, I would not have liked that to have happened to characters, right? I am very much not a fan of characters actually getting eaten alive. Kaputski, right? Characters getting eaten alive and recovering, that's okay. But, you know, nice, lovely, adorable characters just getting eaten alive and then being dead, not such a fan of. Oh, and I will sort of finish off with, I suppose, the thing that the sort of the imagery that kick-started me thinking about the stuff and why I felt the need to do a video on Vore, which is that a couple of days ago I found myself having a dream about Hannibal Lecter and a Controvoxi having a date whilst sharing a naked Amy Pond covered in maple syrup, as she was a were-shark sylph, and giddily sort of cheerfully enjoying the experience. So yeah, my brain is dark. My brain is dark indeed. And if Karen Gillian or Stephen Moffat ever watch this episode, I am so completely fucking sorry. Although, can you imagine Hannibal Lecter and Captain Jack? They would have fun. They would have fun. Thank you to all my Patreons at patreon.com for helping to make videos like this possible. If you wish to leave a like or dislike to rate the video for my analytics, that would be much appreciated. Comments are always welcome, though be aware that they will be moderated before being published, so please be civil. If you liked this video, please consider adding it to your favourites, sharing it to your friends, or subscribing. If you wish to help me out, or my channels, please consider whitelisting my videos in your adblock software, subscribing for monthly donations through Patreon, or giving a small one-off donation. Alternatively, I have a Steam wishlist for games I would consider Let's Playing or streaming, so if you would like to see me broken before the Dark Souls altar, or just happen to have gotten a duplicate of a game in a humble bundle, then you know what to do. I also have an official Facebook fan page, Twitter account, Tumblr, Reddit and blog, so you can stay up to date with all of my videos, blog articles and the things I care about. Links are in the video description. Thank you for taking the time to watch this video. I think that all that now needs to be said is ban all guns, institute universal basic income now, and ensure government is elected by proportional representation. Oh, and also, fuck the racists and fuck the alt-right.